Alexander Fleming is one of the most significant figures in the history of medicine. His groundbreaking discovery of penicillin in 1928 revolutionized the treatment of bacterial infections, paving the way for the development of modern antibiotics. Before his discovery, bacterial infections posed a serious threat to human health, often leading to severe complications or even death. Fleming's work not only changed the course of medicine, but also saved millions of lives worldwide, making him a central figure in scientific history. The importance of his discovery cannot be overstated. Prior to the advent of antibiotics, even minor infections such as cuts, sore throats, or pneumonia could be fatal. The introduction of penicillin provided doctors with a powerful tool to combat bacterial diseases that had previously been untreatable. Its impact was particularly evident during World War II, when penicillin was mass-produced and used to treat wounded soldiers, significantly reducing death from infections. Fleming's contributions to medicine, however, were not limited to penicillin. Before making his most famous discovery, he had already conducted valuable research on antibacterial substances. His earlier work on lysozyme, an enzyme found in bodily fluids such as tears and saliva, demonstrated its ability to attack certain bacteria. Although lysozyme was not as powerful as penicillin, this discovery set the foundation for his later breakthrough in antibiotic research. What makes Fleming's story particularly remarkable is the way he made his discoveries. His scientific success was not purely the result of intentional experimentation, but was also deeply tied to his keen observational skills and willingness to explore unexpected results. The discovery of penicillin itself was the result of an accident. A mold growing in one of his petri dishes destroyed bacterial colonies around it. Unlike many scientists who might have dismissed this as contamination, Fleming recognized its significance and investigated further, leading to one of the most important medical discoveries of all time. Despite the immense importance of penicillin, Fleming faced numerous challenges in bringing his discovery to widespread medical use. Initially, he struggled to extract and stabilize the substance, which limited its practical application. It was only through the later efforts of other scientists, particularly Howard Florey and Ernst Boris Chain, that penicillin was developed into a widely available drug. However, Fleming's initial discovery was crucial, as it laid the groundwork for this advancement. The discovery of penicillin was a turning point in medical science, marking the beginning of the antibiotic era. Before its widespread use, doctors relied on treatments that were often ineffective or dangerous, such as arsenic-based compounds and bloodletting. With antibiotics, bacterial infections that had once been life-threatening could now be easily treated, leading to a dramatic improvement in public health and life expectancy. Fleming's contributions extended beyond the laboratory. He became a global advocate for the responsible use of antibiotics, warning of the dangers of bacterial resistance. He cautioned that misuse, such as overuse or improper dosing, could lead to the emergence of resistant strains of bacteria, a concern that remains highly relevant today. His foresight in this matter demonstrated not only his scientific expertise, but also his deep commitment to public health. The significance of Fleming's discovery was recognized in his lifetime. In 1945, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine, along with Florey and Chain, for his role in the development of penicillin. This recognition cemented his place in history as one of the most influential scientists of the 20th century. His work inspired generations of researchers to explore new antibiotics and treatments for infectious diseases, making his contributions an enduring legacy in medical science. Today, Fleming's impact is still evident in the medical field. Antibiotics remain one of the most essential tools in modern healthcare, and ongoing research continues to build upon his discoveries. However, the rise of antibiotic-resistant bacteria has renewed interest in his warnings about misuse. Scientists are now exploring new ways to combat bacterial infections, including the development of alternative treatments and novel antibiotics. Alexander Fleming was born on August 6, 1881, in the rural village of Lockfield, near Darvel, in Ayrshire, Scotland. He was the seventh of 8 children in a farming family. His father, Hugh Fleming, was a modest farmer who worked the land to provide for his family, while his mother, Grace Sterling Morton, took care of the household and ensured that her children received a good upbringing. Though the family was not wealthy, they valued education and hard work, qualities that would shape young Alexander's future. Growing up in the Scottish countryside, Fleming developed a deep appreciation for nature and an innate curiosity about the world around him. The rolling green fields, the streams that ran through the land, and the quiet solitude of farm life gave him an early sense of discipline and observation. He attended a local school in Darvel, where he demonstrated a keen intellect and a particular talent for science and mathematics. Despite his intelligence, there were no immediate signs that he would one day revolutionize medicine. Tragedy struck early in Fleming's life when his father passed away in 1888, leaving his mother to raise the children alone. Though this was a difficult time for the family, they persevered, ensuring that Alexander and his siblings continued their education. His elder brother, Thomas Fleming, had already established himself as a physician in London, and he would later play a crucial role in shaping Alexander's academic and professional path. At the age of 13, Fleming won a scholarship to Kilmarnock Academy, a prestigious secondary school where he continued to excel in his studies. His academic performance allowed him to secure a place at the prestigious Royal Polytechnic Institution in London, where he further developed his skills in science. However, his journey to becoming a scientist was not straightforward. Before pursuing medicine, he briefly worked in a shipping office, an experience that made him realize his true calling lay elsewhere. A turning point in his life came when his brother Thomas encouraged him to study medicine. In 1901, Fleming enrolled at St. Mary's Hospital Medical School in London, an institution known for its strong emphasis on research and innovation. At St. Mary's, he thrived under the guidance of some of the most respected medical professionals of the time. He was particularly drawn to the field of bacteriology, a relatively new and evolving area of study that sought to understand microscopic organisms and their role in human disease. Fleming's dedication to his studies quickly became evident. He was an exceptional student, displaying not only academic excellence, but also a natural aptitude for laboratory work. His meticulous approach to research and his ability to think critically set him apart from his peers. In 1906, he graduated with distinction, earning a degree in medicine. His impressive performance earned him a position as a researcher at St. Mary's, where he would spend the rest of his career making groundbreaking discoveries. While at St. Mary's, Fleming became associated with Sir Amroth Wright, a leading bacteriologist and a pioneer in vaccine research. Wright's work on the human immune system and bacterial infections deeply influenced Fleming's own scientific pursuits. Under Wright's mentorship, he began conducting research on how the body's natural defenses could fight infections, a theme that would later become central to his most famous discoveries. Despite his growing success in the medical field, Fleming remained humble and deeply committed to his work. He had little interest in personal fame or recognition, focusing instead on the practical applications of his research. His colleagues often described him as quiet, observant, and patient, qualities that would serve him well in the years to come. Unlike many scientists who rigidly followed established theories, Fleming had a flexible and open-minded approach, which allowed him to make unexpected discoveries. During his early years at St. Mary's, Fleming also developed an interest in the effects of antiseptics, particularly their use in treating wounds. He noticed that many common antiseptic treatments, while effective at killing bacteria, also cause significant harm to human tissue. This observation would later inspire his work on finding safer and more effective antibacterial treatments, ultimately leading to his discovery of penicillin. In 1914, as the world plunged into the turmoil of World War I, Alexander Fleming found himself at the forefront of medical science in a way he had never anticipated. When Britain entered the war, he enlisted in the Royal Army Medical Corps, where his expertise in bacteriology was put to critical use. He was stationed at a military hospital in Boulogne, France, where he worked tirelessly to treat soldiers suffering from infected wounds, a problem that claimed countless lives on the battlefield. The conditions in the wartime hospitals were dire, with limited medical resources and a constant influx of wounded soldiers. Doctors struggled to control infections. At the time, antiseptics such as carbolic acid were widely used to clean wounds. While these chemicals killed bacteria, they also damaged healthy tissue, often causing more harm than good. Fleming quickly noticed that soldiers treated with these antiseptics frequently developed severe complications, leading him to question the effectiveness of conventional medical practices. Determined to find a better solution, Fleming began studying the nature of wound infections and the body's ability to fight bacteria. His observations led him to conclude that antiseptics, rather than preventing infections, were sometimes making them worse by destroying the body's natural defenses. He noted that deep wounds, in particular, were especially vulnerable to bacterial growth because antiseptics failed to penetrate far enough to kill harmful microbes. This realization challenged widely accepted medical beliefs and would later inspire his search for more effective antibacterial treatments. During his time in the military, Fleming also became fascinated with the study of staphylococcal bacteria, one of the primary causes of wound infections. He meticulously documented how these bacteria thrived in the unhygienic conditions of war hospitals, spreading rapidly among injured soldiers. His research revealed that the human immune system played a crucial role in fighting infections and that supporting the body's natural defenses could be more effective than using harsh chemical treatments. After the war ended in 1918, Fleming returned to St. Mary's Hospital in London, deeply affected by what he had witnessed on the battlefield. His experiences strengthened his resolve to find new ways to combat bacterial infections without harming human tissue. He resumed his work in bacteriology with renewed determination, focusing on discovering substances that could eliminate harmful microbes while preserving the body's natural healing abilities. It was during this period that he made one of his first significant discoveries, lysozyme. In 1921, while conducting experiments with nasal mucus, tears, and saliva, he identified an enzyme capable of breaking down certain bacteria. This discovery was groundbreaking because it provided evidence that the body possessed natural antibacterial agents. Although lysozyme was not strong enough to fight severe infections, its discovery marked an important step in Fleming's scientific journey, reinforcing his belief that nature itself might hold the key to fighting disease. Fleming's work on lysozyme earned him recognition within the scientific community, but it also reinforced his reputation as a meticulous and patient researcher. He was known for his methodical approach, spending countless hours observing bacterial cultures under a microscope, making careful notes, and testing different hypotheses. His ability to notice small but significant details would later prove crucial to his most famous discovery. As his research progressed, Fleming became increasingly interested in the behavior of bacteria and how they responded to different environmental conditions. He experimented with various substances, searching for new ways to kill harmful microbes without damaging human cells. While many of his experiments yielded inconclusive results, he remained undeterred, believing that persistence and careful observation would eventually lead to a breakthrough. Despite his growing reputation in the scientific world, Fleming remained humble and dedicated to his work. He had little interest in personal fame and was more concerned with practical applications of his research. His colleagues admired his quiet determination, describing him as a man who was more comfortable in the laboratory than in the spotlight. However, his discoveries were beginning to attract attention, setting the stage for a moment that would change medical history forever. By the early 1920s, Alexander Fleming had established himself as a meticulous researcher with a deep interest in bacteriology. His experiences in World War I had heightened his awareness of the dangers of bacterial infections, and his return to St. Mary's Hospital allowed him to pursue a more scientific approach to fighting these invisible enemies. While he had not yet discovered penicillin, he was already laying the groundwork for understanding how the body naturally combats bacteria. This work would lead to one of his first major scientific contributions, the discovery of lysozyme. Fleming's discovery of lysozyme, like many of his scientific breakthroughs, happened unexpectedly. In 1921, while battling a cold, he accidentally sneezed onto a petri dish containing a culture of bacteria. Instead of discarding the contaminated dish, his instinct for careful observation led him to examine it under a microscope. To his surprise, he noticed that the area where the mucus had landed showed signs of bacterial destruction. The bacteria had been weakened or entirely dissolved in the presence of the nasal secretion. Intrigued by this unexpected reaction, Fleming decided to conduct further experiments. He tested various bodily fluids, including saliva, tears, and even egg whites, to determine whether they possessed similar antibacterial properties. His experiments confirmed that a substance within these fluids was capable of breaking down certain types of bacteria. He named this enzyme lysozyme, a term derived from lysis, meaning to break apart or dissolve. This discovery was groundbreaking, as it revealed that the human body had its own natural defense mechanisms against bacterial infections. Fleming's work with lysozyme marked an important shift in his scientific approach. Unlike antiseptics, which indiscriminately killed both harmful and beneficial bacteria, lysozyme appeared to selectively attack only specific bacterial strains. This observation reinforced his belief that the best way to fight infections was to support the body's natural defenses rather than relying on harsh chemical treatments. Although lysozyme was not powerful enough to combat severe infections, it was one of the first known antibacterial substances produced by the body, and it provided an important foundation for future antibiotic research. As he continued to experiment with lysozyme, Fleming encountered certain limitations. While the enzyme was effective against some non-harmful bacteria, it had little effect on the more dangerous and disease-causing strains, such as Staphylococcus or Streptococcus. This meant that lysozyme, despite its impressive properties, could not be used as a universal treatment for infections. Nevertheless, the discovery was an important step in understanding how the human body naturally fights bacteria and would later influence research into stronger antibacterial agents. Fleming's findings attracted the attention of his peers in the scientific community, who recognized the potential implications of his discovery. While lysozyme itself did not lead to an immediate medical breakthrough, it demonstrated that bacteria could be weakened and destroyed by naturally occurring substances. This idea would prove to be crucial when Fleming later encountered the mold that produced penicillin. His work with lysozyme had trained him to notice small but significant bacterial changes, a skill that would be instrumental in his future discoveries. Beyond the scientific implications, Fleming's discovery of lysozyme also reflected his unconventional approach to research. Many scientists at the time followed rigid experimental procedures, discarding anything that seemed like an accident. Fleming, however, had an instinct for paying attention to unexpected results. His ability to recognize the importance of what others might have ignored set him apart and ultimately led him toward his most famous discovery. The discovery of lysozyme also reinforced Fleming's belief in the need for alternative antibacterial treatments. His wartime observations had already convinced him that antiseptics were often harmful, and lysozyme confirmed that nature itself might provide safer ways to combat infection. While lysozyme was not the answer, it pointed him in the right direction, pushing him to continue his search for more effective antibacterial substances. As the 1920s progressed, Fleming remained committed to his work, spending long hours in his laboratory at St. Mary's Hospital. While other scientists pursued more conventional medical research, he continued his detailed studies of bacteria, often using unconventional methods. His curiosity and patience would soon lead him to another accidental yet world-changing discovery, the one that would cement his place in history. In the late summer of 1928, Alexander Fleming was focused on his research at St. Mary's Hospital in London, continuing his studies of bacterial cultures and the possibility of finding new ways to treat infections. His laboratory was filled with the quiet hum of petri dishes, microscopes, and cultures of bacteria. Fleming's life as a researcher was one of careful observation and patience, and his approach to science was methodical. However, What he didn't know was that an unexpected turn of events would soon lead to the most significant discovery of his career, the discovery of penicillin. The pivotal moment in this journey occurred when Fleming returned from a 2-week holiday in September 1928. As was customary, he began to go through his laboratory's petri dishes, inspecting bacterial cultures that had been left behind in his absence. One of the dishes, however, caught his attention. It was a plate containing a culture of Staphylococcus bacteria, but it appeared to be different from the others. Around a patch of mold on the plate, the bacterial colonies had been destroyed. The mold, which was a foreign substance, seemed to have had an extraordinary effect on the bacteria, rendering them inactive. Fleming's sharp scientific mind immediately recognized that this was no ordinary observation. While it wasn't unusual for bacteria cultures to be contaminated with mold, he had never seen anything like this before. The bacteria surrounding the mold had been completely eradicated, as if a powerful force had wiped them out. Intrigued by this phenomenon, Fleming carefully examined the mold and realized that it had a substance within it that appeared to have strong antibacterial properties. The mold was identified as belonging to the Penicillium genus, and it was this mold that would later be recognized as the source of penicillin. Fleming initially described the mold's effect on bacteria as a clear zone around it, where no bacteria grew. His curiosity and instinct for scientific investigation prompted him to conduct further experiments to isolate the antibacterial substance from a mold. He called this substance penicillin, a name derived from the mold's genus, Penicillium notatum. Fleming's first tests were promising. He discovered that penicillin was able to kill a wide range of harmful bacteria, including those responsible for causing severe infections such as pneumonia, sepsis, and scarlet fever. However, there were significant challenges ahead. Isolating penicillin in sufficient quantities for experimentation and clinical use proved to be difficult. The substance was unstable and difficult to extract in large enough amounts to test its true potential. Nevertheless, Fleming was undeterred, continuing his work with the mold and striving to refine his methods. In the beginning, Fleming's discovery was met with skepticism from some of his colleagues. Many scientists were dubious about the power of penicillin, particularly because it had not yet been isolated in sufficient quantities to demonstrate its full effectiveness. Additionally, the idea that a mold could produce a substance strong enough to kill bacteria was an unconventional and, to some, unbelievable concept. Despite the challenges, Fleming pressed forward, confident that he had stumbled upon something extraordinary. Fleming's breakthrough, however, came at a time when the medical world was still largely reliant on outdated and sometimes dangerous treatments. Infections were a constant threat, and many bacterial diseases had no known cure. The introduction of penicillin seemed to offer hope, but its clinical application would require further research and the development of methods for mass production. At this stage, it was still unclear whether penicillin would ever make it out of the laboratory and into the hands of doctors who could use it to save lives. It was not until several years later, when scientists such as Howard Florey and Ernst Borsheim began working alongside Fleming, that the true potential of penicillin was realized. Together, they developed techniques for isolating and producing penicillin on a large scale, making it possible for the substance to be used in hospitals worldwide. Their work, in conjunction with Fleming's pioneering discovery, would lead to the mass production of penicillin, saving countless lives during World War II and in the years that followed. Looking back on his discovery, Fleming often referred to it as an accident, acknowledging that it was not the result of a carefully planned experiment. Instead, it was a combination of observation, curiosity, and a bit of luck. However, the true significance of his discovery was not just in the mold itself, but in the way Fleming's scientific mind recognized the importance of an unexpected result. His ability to see the potential of what others might have dismissed as a simple contamination ultimately changed the course of medical history. After Alexander Fleming's discovery of penicillin in 1928, the road to turning this accidental breakthrough into a medical revolution was not smooth. Though he recognized the potential of penicillin, Early challenges in isolating and producing it in usable quantities meant that its therapeutic promise remained largely theoretical. The substance itself was unstable and difficult to extract in amounts sufficient for serious experimentation, let alone clinical treatment. Yet, Fleming's unshakable belief in the importance of his discovery propelled him forward, despite the initial skepticism he encountered from the scientific community. In the years following his discovery, Fleming spent countless hours in his laboratory refining his methods. He experimented with different strains of penicillium mold, tried to identify one that could produce higher yields of penicillin. However, his experiments were stymied by the same fundamental issue. Penicillin was hard to produce in any significant quantity. Fleming's efforts to isolate the substance were commendable, but he was ultimately working within the confines of the technology and resources available at the time, which made the large-scale production of penicillin seem nearly impossible. Fleming was also frustrated by the slow pace of progress in securing funding for his research. At this time, antibiotics were still an improving concept, and many in the medical field were cautious about embracing them. Furthermore, the outbreak of the Great Depression in the early 1930s created additional economic constraints, further limiting the financial support for experimental research. Despite these setbacks, Fleming continued to collaborate with colleagues and look for innovative solutions. He was undeterred by the challenges in front of him because of his strong belief that penicillin could change the way bacterial infections were treated. Fleming's persistence eventually paid off when he caught the attention of two influential scientists from Oxford University, Sir Howard Florey and Dr. Sir Ernst Boris Chain. In 1938, the duo, having been introduced to Fleming's research on penicillin, recognized its enormous potential. They saw that Fleming's discovery could be the solution to many of the bacterial diseases that were causing widespread suffering, particularly during the global conflict of World War II, which was looming on the horizon. But Florey and Chain, like Fleming before them, were aware of the difficulties involved in isolating and producing penicillin in sufficient amounts. Their expertise in chemistry and their focus on pharmaceutical solutions would prove crucial to overcoming these hurdles. Florey, Chain, and their team at Oxford developed methods for cultivating penicillium mold on a larger scale. They experimented with growing the mold in deep fermenting vats, using liquid cultures and adjusting various environmental factors to encourage the production of penicillin. The breakthrough came in 1940, when they were able to produce enough penicillin to conduct animal trials. These trials demonstrated that penicillin was indeed an effective treatment for bacterial infections, and the stage was set for human clinical trials. In 1941, a critically ill patient in the UK, Albert Alexander, became the first person to be treated with penicillin. The results were astounding. His condition improved dramatically as the penicillin cleared the infection in his body. However, the limited supply of penicillin meant that the treatment was not sustainable for the patient, and he ultimately passed away. Still, the success of the initial human trial proved beyond doubt that penicillin had the potential to save lives. The clinical trials for penicillin expanded rapidly following these early successes. The combined efforts of Fleming, Florey, Chain, and their colleagues attracted the attention of pharmaceutical companies, especially in the United States. The U.S. government, recognizing the strategic importance of penicillin in the ongoing war effort, provided significant funding for its mass production. Companies like Merck and Pfizer, previously focused on other pharmaceutical products, shifted their efforts to producing penicillin. By 1943, large-scale production of the drug was underway, and by 1944, penicillin was being distributed to soldiers in large quantities, contributing to a sharp decline in deaths from infections. Fleming's discovery had reached a level of recognition and impact that few could have predicted when he first made his observation in the lab. The mass production of penicillin marked the beginning of a new era in medicine. What was once a laboratory curiosity had become a life-saving tool, used on the battlefield and in civilian hospitals alike. The pharmaceutical industry transformed as the world came to understand the power of antibiotics and bacterial infections, once a leading cause of death, became much easier to treat. Fleming's role in the development of penicillin was widely acknowledged, and he began to receive accolades for his groundbreaking work. In 1945, along with Florian Chain, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for the discovery of penicillin and its profound impact on human health. The Nobel Prize, which was the culmination of years of hard work, research, and collaboration, solidified Fleming's place in the annals of scientific history. The recognition was not just for the discovery itself, but also for his unwavering commitment to pursuing a cure for infections that had claimed so many lives. However, despite the widespread acclaim, Fleming remained humble throughout his career. He frequently credited his success to the collective efforts of the research community, acknowledging the contributions of his colleagues Florian Chain, as well as the many others who had worked with him to refine and popularize the use of penicillin. He also continued to express his disbelief that his accidental observation had led to a revolution in medicine. The widespread success of penicillin ushered in a new era of medicine, where bacterial infections that once caused untold suffering could now be treated with remarkable ease. By the mid-1940s, penicillin had made its mark on the global stage, transforming the treatment of diseases like pneumonia, tuberculosis, scarlet fever, and even wound infections. It was a momentous shift in the practice of medicine, one that saved millions of lives during and after World War II. But the true significance of penicillin's discovery went beyond the battlefield and hospitals. It laid the foundation for the entire field of antibiotics, shaping the future of medical science for generations to come. Before penicillin, bacterial infections were one of the leading causes of death worldwide. Doctors had limited tools at their disposal to treat the growing number of infections that followed surgeries, childbirth, or injuries. In some cases, patients would succumb to infections as a result of what seemed to be relatively minor wounds. This grim reality began to change dramatically with the introduction of penicillin. For the first time, a medical tool had the potential to stop the spread of bacterial infections and allow patients to recover fully. During World War II, penicillin became an indispensable asset on the battlefield. Wounded soldiers, once at high risk of dying from infected wounds, now had a fighting chance at survival. Penicillin was distributed extensively to military hospitals, significantly reducing the number of soldiers who died from secondary infections. The drug was credited with saving more lives than the battle itself, and it became one of the key components of medical care during the war. Its success on the battlefield demonstrated not only its effectiveness, but also its enormous potential to save lives across the world, far beyond the confines of wartime use. The post-war period saw penicillin's mass production ramp up as governments and pharmaceutical companies realized the vast potential for civilian use. Factories dedicated to producing penicillin were built across the United States and Europe. In the U.S., the government facilitated large-scale production through its wartime contracts, and soon, penicillin was readily available to the general population. Hospitals, once overwhelmed with the devastating consequences of bacterial infections, now had an affordable, effective solution to combat these diseases. Penicillin's impact extended to civilian life, drastically changing the landscape of public health. Diseases that had once taken lives indiscriminately were now being managed with precision. Pneumonia, which had claimed countless lives during the first half of the 20th century, was now a treatable condition. A condition as common as a bacterial throat infection could be handled swiftly with a course of penicillin. Hospitals around the world saw a decline in mortality rates as penicillin became a staple in every treatment regimen. Yet, the discovery of penicillin also brought to light a new challenge for medical science: the emergence of antibiotic resistance. As the use of penicillin became widespread, some bacteria began to evolve, becoming resistant to its effects. It didn't take long for scientists to realize that bacteria could adapt quickly to antibiotics, and penicillin was no exception. The rise of antibiotic-resistant strains of bacteria posed a significant challenge to medicine, threatening to undo much of the progress that had been made in the fight against infections. The phenomenon of antibiotic resistance led to further advancements in medical research, as scientists worked to understand the underlying mechanisms that made bacteria resistant to penicillin. This sparked the development of new antibiotics and therapeutic strategies, but it also highlighted the importance of responsible use of these drugs. The discovery of penicillin, while revolutionary, had opened a Pandora's box, one that scientists and doctors would continue to grapple with for years to come. Despite the emergence of resistance, penicillin remained one of the most important medical discoveries in history. Fleming himself was aware of the dangers of overuse. In the years following his Nobel Prize in 1945, he frequently warned the medical community about the potential for antibiotic resistance. He cautioned that penicillin, like any other drug, should be used judiciously and only when necessary. He feared that overprescribing antibiotics or using them in situations where they weren't essential could lead to the very problem that was now emerging: resistance. His foresight was remarkable, and his warnings continue to resonate in the field of medicine today. As penicillin continued to save lives and fight infections across the globe, its legacy began to unfold. In the decades following its discovery, antibiotics became a cornerstone of modern medicine. The treatment of bacterial infections evolved rapidly, and surgical procedures that were once considered too dangerous because of the risk of infection became routine. Penicillin was also used to treat conditions such as syphilis and gonorrhea, leading to a significant decline in these once widespread diseases. The ability to prevent the spread of infections during childbirth also reduced maternal and infant mortality rates. Beyond the clinical applications of penicillin, the discovery had a profound impact on public health systems around the world. Penicillin was integral to the development of vaccines, chemotherapy, and other treatments that relied on its ability to eliminate bacteria from the body. It inspired the research that led to the creation of a variety of antibiotics, each designed to combat different classes of bacteria. The era of antibiotic discovery was born from Fleming's initial accident, and new classes of drugs would follow in the decades that followed, continuing to save lives and shape modern medicine. Fleming's role in this transformation of global health was immense. While the work of Florey, Chain, and others contributed to the mass production and clinical use of penicillin, it was Fleming's discovery that sparked the entire revolution in antibiotic medicine. His ability to recognize the significance of a seemingly trivial observation in his laboratory would forever alter the trajectory of medicine. In his quiet way, he had changed the course of human history. In the years after penicillin's widespread use, Fleming was celebrated as a pioneer in medical science. He received countless honors and awards for his contributions, but he remained a modest figure. Throughout his life, he insisted that the discovery of penicillin was largely a result of luck and his patient observation, emphasizing the collective nature of scientific progress. His humility, despite the immense global impact of his work, endeared him to those who worked alongside him and to future generations of scientists. The success of penicillin marked a pivotal moment in the history of medicine, offering a powerful tool to combat bacterial infections that had previously claimed countless lives. However, as penicillin became more widely used, new challenges began to emerge, the most pressing of which was antibiotic resistance. This phenomenon, where bacteria evolve mechanisms to survive despite the presence of antibiotics, threatened to undermine the very miracle that had saved so many lives. While Alexander Fleming had warned about the potential for resistance, the scale of the problem became apparent only after the widespread adoption of penicillin and other antibiotics. The emergence of antibiotic resistance became an urgent concern for medical professionals in the mid-20th century. As bacteria were exposed to antibiotics in hospitals, communities, and the agricultural industry, some bacteria began to mutate and adapt, rendering the drugs less effective. Initially, these resistant strains were rare, but over time, their prevalence increased. The development of penicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, often called MRSA, and the spread of multi-drug-resistant tuberculosis, MDR-TB, highlighted the vulnerability of our reliance on antibiotics. The overuse and misuse of antibiotics contributed significantly to the rise of resistance. In hospitals, antibiotics were frequently prescribed as a precautionary measure or used inappropriately for conditions where they were not needed, such as viral infections. This widespread misuse created an environment where bacteria could evolve more quickly. Developing resistance to the drugs meant to combat them. The agricultural sector also played a role, with antibiotics being used in livestock to promote growth and prevent infections, leading to the development of resistant bacteria that could be transferred to humans through food consumption or environmental contamination. The early 21st century saw an alarming increase in antibiotic-resistant infections. Infections that were once easily treatable began to take a deadly toll, as patients infected with resistant bacteria faced limited treatment options. The development of new antibiotics had slowed, and pharmaceutical companies were often hesitant to invest in antibiotic research due to the high cost and long timelines associated with bringing new drugs to market. This situation created a stark contrast to the optimism of the 1940s, when penicillin was hailed as the dawn of a new age of medicine. In response to the growing crisis, researchers began to explore new avenues for combating antibiotic resistance. One of the most promising areas of research was the development of new classes of antibiotics that could bypass the mechanisms by which bacteria had become resistant. Scientists focused on understanding the molecular mechanisms that allowed bacteria to resist antibiotics, seeking to develop drugs that could target these new vulnerabilities. Despite significant progress, however, the development of truly novel antibiotics remained slow, and the threat of resistance loomed large. In addition to new drug development, efforts were made to promote the responsible use of antibiotics, often referred to as antibiotic stewardship. Health organizations and governments began to implement guidelines to limit the unnecessary use of antibiotics in both human medicine and agriculture. Campaigns aimed at educating the public and healthcare professionals about the dangers of overusing antibiotics became more widespread, with the goal of slowing the rate of resistance. While these efforts were important, the problem remained complex and multifaceted, requiring long-term commitment and collaboration across various sectors of society. Fleming, though no longer alive to witness the full scale of the crisis, had been prescient in his warnings about antibiotic resistance. In interviews and speeches, he had cautioned the public and the scientific community about the need for careful management of antibiotics. His words have continued to resonate with medical professionals, as the issue of resistance has become one of the defining challenges of modern medicine. The lessons Fleming imparted about responsible antibiotic use are more relevant than ever as the world confronts the consequences of his initial discovery. In the midst of this crisis, scientists also turned to alternative approaches to treating infections. One promising area of research was the exploration of bacteriophages, viruses that infect and kill bacteria. Bacteriophages had been used as a treatment in the early 20th century before the widespread adoption of antibiotics. But with the rise of antibiotic resistance, they were revisited as a potential solution. Researchers have also looked into the possibility of developing vaccines against bacterial infections, which could prevent infections in the first place and reduce the need for antibiotics altogether. In addition to these scientific efforts, the role of public health infrastructure became even more apparent. Strengthening global surveillance of antibiotic resistance, improving hygiene and sanitation, and ensuring equitable access to healthcare became essential components of the fight against resistant infections. In many parts of the world, where access to antibiotics is limited or where infections are often treated with substandard drugs, the spread of resistance has been particularly pronounced. International cooperation and investment in health infrastructure have become critical to managing the global threat posed by resistant bacteria. Despite these efforts, the battle against antibiotic resistance remains ongoing. As new resistant strains of bacteria emerge, the search for effective treatments continues. The development of vaccines, novel antibiotics, and alternative therapies, such as antimicrobial peptides and immune system boosters, offers hope for the future. However, there is no silver bullet, and the fight against antibiotic resistance will require the combined efforts of researchers, healthcare professionals, policymakers, and the general public. Fleming's legacy, then, is not just in his discovery of penicillin, but also in the challenges that have followed. His initial insight into the potential of antibiotics has led to a revolution in medicine, but it has also highlighted the fragile nature of scientific progress. Penicillin, while an extraordinary achievement, also serves as a reminder of the complex relationship between innovation and responsibility. As we continue to confront the growing issue of antibiotic resistance, Fleming's work remains central to understanding the balance between scientific advancement and the need for careful stewardship. While Alexander Fleming's scientific achievements are his enduring legacy, it is important to understand the man behind the discovery of penicillin. Despite his monumental contribution to medicine, Fleming's personal life was marked by modesty, humility, and a deep sense of duty to his work. Known for his quiet demeanor, he was not one to seek fame or recognition, and much of his life was spent quietly dedicated to his research. His character and values shaped the way he approached science and made him one of the most respected figures in the scientific community. Fleming was born into a farming family in Lockfield, Scotland, on August 6, 1881, the second of 4 children. His early life was shaped by the simplicity of rural life, and it was here that his natural curiosity and keen observational skills began to develop. His father, a farmer, passed away when Fleming was only 7 years old, and his mother was left to raise the children on her own. Despite these early hardships, Fleming excelled in his studies and developed a passion for learning that would stay with him throughout his life. After completing his schooling in Scotland, Fleming moved to London in 1901 to pursue a career in medicine. He enrolled at St. Mary's Hospital Medical School, where he showed early signs of promise, particularly in his interest in bacteriology. While at St. Mary's, Fleming worked under the mentorship of Sir Rothwright, a leading figure in immunology, whose influence helped shape Fleming's future career path. Wright's emphasis on the importance of research in the fight against infectious diseases resonated deeply with Fleming, and it was during this time that he began to focus on the potential for scientific breakthroughs in treating bacterial infections. In the years that followed, Fleming's dedication to his research became evident. He was known for his intense work ethic and his capacity for sustained focus. Despite his busy clinical duties, he never allowed his commitment to research to wane. He would often spend long hours in the laboratory, experimenting with various strains of bacteria and exploring their characteristics. His passion for science was not driven by the desire for accolades or fame, but by a genuine belief in the importance of finding solutions to the problems facing humanity. Though he was deeply committed to his work, Fleming's personal life was marked by periods of solitude. He was never married, and his devotion to his research left little room for personal relationships. Some have speculated that his dedication to science, particularly his focus on penicillin, may have contributed to his solitary nature. In later years, he was known to have said that science was his first love, and it was evident in the way he prioritized his research above all else. Yet, those who knew him described him as warm and kind-hearted, with a dry sense of humor that made him approachable to colleagues and students alike. Fleming's character was defined by his humility. He was not a man who sought attention for his accomplishments. Even after his groundbreaking discovery, he remained modest, often downplaying his role in the development of penicillin. He frequently acknowledged the contributions of others, particularly the work of Howard Florey and Sir Ernst Boris Chain, who helped turn his discovery into a usable drug. Fleming believed that science was a collective effort, and he was always quick to share credit with his colleagues. This modesty extended to his acceptance of the Nobel Prize in 1945, when he famously remarked that the recognition was the result of the work of many hands. Despite his modesty, Fleming's work ethic and determination set him apart in the scientific community. His ability to work through challenges, particularly in the face of the difficulties involved in isolating penicillin, demonstrated his resilience and commitment. His passion for discovery was driven by a sense of purpose rather than personal ambition. He believed that the ultimate goal of scientific research was to serve humanity, and he was driven by a deep desire to contribute to the greater good. Fleming's legacy is also marked by his deep sense of responsibility as a scientist. He understood the impact his discovery could have on the world and was keenly aware of the ethical considerations surrounding the use of penicillin. He often spoke about the dangers of overusing antibiotics and the need for careful stewardship to avoid the emergence of resistance. In many ways, his ethical approach to science set a standard for future generations of researchers. He exemplified the idea that scientific discovery should not be pursued for personal gain, but should be used to improve the well-being of society. Beyond his work in the laboratory, Fleming was deeply involved in the scientific community. He was a member of several prominent medical and scientific societies, and his career was marked by collaborations with leading figures in the field of bacteriology. He was also a respected educator, mentoring several young scientists throughout his career. His teaching was not confined to formal lectures. He often shared his insights and expertise with colleagues and students alike in more informal settings, fostering a spirit of collaboration and intellectual curiosity. Fleming's sense of duty extended beyond the confines of his laboratory and professional life. He had a strong sense of public service, and during World War II, he worked tirelessly to ensure that penicillin would be made available to soldiers and civilians alike. His contributions to the war effort, alongside his groundbreaking research, cemented his reputation as a scientist with a sense of social responsibility. He believed that science should serve humanity, and he took this philosophy to heart in both his personal and professional life. In the later years of his life, Fleming continued to receive accolades for his contributions to medicine. He was knighted in 1944, an honor that recognized not just his scientific achievements, but also his dedication to the betterment of society. However, even as he enjoyed this recognition, he remained grounded and committed to his work. He was not one to bask in the glow of fame, preferring instead to focus on his research and the ongoing challenges in the field of medicine. Fleming's humility, combined with his scientific brilliance, made him a respected figure not just in his field, but in the broader world of academia and medicine. In 1955, Alexander Fleming passed away at the age of 73. His death marked the end of an era in the fight against infectious diseases, but his contributions to medicine continue to shape the field to this day. His work with penicillin revolutionized the treatment of bacterial infections, and his ethical approach to science serves as an enduring example for future generations of researchers. The story of Alexander Fleming is one of remarkable scientific discovery, but it is also a story of an enduring legacy that continues to influence modern medicine and healthcare practices to this day. While his discovery of penicillin is widely regarded as one of the greatest medical breakthroughs in history, the impact of his work transcends the confines of a laboratory. Fleming's work not only transformed the treatment of infections, but also reshaped the way we think about disease, public health, and the ethics of scientific research. After the widespread success of penicillin, the field of microbiology and pharmacology underwent a revolution. Penicillin was the first of a new class of drugs known as antibiotics, which would go on to save countless lives worldwide. Yet, it wasn't just penicillin's ability to combat infections that was groundbreaking. It was also the way in which it changed the global perspective on treating diseases. Prior to antibiotics, many bacterial infections were often death sentences, but with penicillin and its successors, the medical community was suddenly armed with the tools to fight diseases that were once considered incurable. Fleming's discovery set the stage for the golden age of antibiotics, a period that saw the development of other life-saving drugs like streptomycin, tetracycline, and erythromycin. The widespread use of these drugs led to a dramatic decline in mortality rates from infectious diseases. What was once a terrifying and fatal threat was now manageable. The rapid development of new antibiotics over the following decades demonstrated the potential for science to bring about widespread health improvements. Fleming's work had opened the door to a new era of medicine, where bacterial infections could be controlled and patients could survive illnesses that would have been fatal just a few decades earlier. Yet, as antibiotics became more prevalent, so did the challenges associated with their use. The rise of antibiotic resistance, which emerged as a direct consequence of the widespread and sometimes indiscriminate use of antibiotics, is perhaps the most pressing issue facing modern medicine today. Fleming's warnings about the potential for resistance in the 1940s have proven to be prophetic. Today, multi-drug-resistant bacteria pose a significant threat to global health, and infections that were once easily treatable have become increasingly difficult to manage. Fleming's legacy, however, lies not just in his discovery of penicillin, but also in his foresight regarding the complexities and responsibilities of using antibiotics. His calls for careful stewardship of antibiotics have become more relevant than ever as the medical community grapples with the consequences of overuse. In the decades following Fleming's discovery, efforts to combat antibiotic resistance have become central to the ongoing fight against infectious diseases. Governments and health organizations around the world have adopted policies to limit the misuse of antibiotics, and research continues into developing new drugs and treatment strategies. However, the need for innovation in the field of antibiotics remains pressing. The urgency of developing new antibiotics, along with alternative therapies such as bacteriophages and vaccines, has never been greater. Fleming's legacy, therefore, continues to influence the direction of modern medical research as scientists and doctors work to stay ahead of the evolving threat of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Beyond the scientific realm, Fleming's influence also extends to the broader field of public health. His work emphasized the importance of accessible healthcare and the need for equitable access to life-saving treatments. The global distribution of penicillin during World War II and later its mass production for civilian use marked a turning point in how medicines were viewed not just as tools for individuals, but as global resources. Fleming's discovery demonstrated that medical advances should be made available to all people, regardless of their geographic location or socioeconomic status. His work laid the foundation for modern public health efforts that focus on the global distribution of vaccines, medicines, and health resources, especially in underserved areas. Fleming's impact on education and the scientific community cannot be overstated. Throughout his career, he mentored many students and young researchers, imparting not just his knowledge, but also his values of diligence, humility, and ethical responsibility. His commitment to scientific inquiry, balanced by a deep sense of social responsibility, set an example for generations of scientists to follow. His scientific integrity and sense of duty to humanity have become foundational principles for those working in the fields of medical research and healthcare. In addition to his scientific contributions, Fleming's character and approach to life serve as a model for how scientists should engage with the world around them. He approached his work with a sense of purpose, driven by a desire to solve real-world problems rather than by the pursuit of personal fame or recognition. His humility in the face of global recognition demonstrated that true scientific progress is not about individual accolades, but about improving the lives of others. This sense of altruism and responsibility remains an important principle in the scientific community, especially as new challenges in medicine and global health continue to emerge. Fleming's recognition of the interconnectedness of science and society also underscores his legacy. He was acutely aware of how advancements in science could have far-reaching implications beyond the laboratory. The way penicillin transformed medical practice was a testament to the potential for science to improve the human condition. Yet he also recognized that scientific progress must be handled with care, as the consequences of misusing such powerful discoveries could be detrimental. His work serves as a reminder that science, when applied thoughtfully and responsibly, can be a force for good in society. Today, as the world faces new health challenges such as pandemics, emerging diseases, and the growing threat of antibiotic resistance, the principles set forth by Alexander Fleming continue to guide medical research and policy. The ongoing fight against infectious diseases is a testament to the lasting relevance of his discovery. His ability to recognize the potential of a seemingly small observation and his dedication to improving public health through science is a model for all who work in the field of medicine. Fleming's legacy is not just confined to the history books, but continues to live on in the lives of those who benefit from the medicines he helped bring into the world. His story reminds us that scientific breakthroughs are not just about individual achievement, but about the broader impact on society. Through his discovery of penicillin, Fleming changed the course of history and left a legacy that continues to save lives and inspire new generations of scientists, doctors, and healthcare professionals. His impact is felt in the lives of millions who have been spared from the ravages of infectious disease, and his legacy will endure for as long as antibiotics remain a cornerstone of modern medicine. As we look to the future, we are reminded that the challenges Fleming faced in the early days of antibiotic discovery, innovation, resistance, and responsibility are still with us. But his work has shown us that through careful stewardship, collaboration, and continued innovation, the future of medicine remains full of promise. Alexander Fleming's life and work remind us that science, when used for the greater good, has the power to change the world.